So today it's expected that the Chancellor will fund your department with an extra £2.2 billion. Is this additional to what had already been announced, or is it really the funding of the previously announced plan to get to 2.5% of GDP by 2027?
No, this is 2.2 billion this year on top of the 2.9 billion she announced in October. So that's a total of more than 5 billion as a first bold step, if you like, on the path to increasing defence spending to 2.5% of GDP. And she'll say this afternoon that the world is changing. Our task is to secure Britain's future. And this investment, it means that we can make Britain stronger, safer in a more insecure world, but it also means that we can see defence create the good jobs right across the country that people in Britain and this economy needs.
Is it fair to say, Defence Secretary, that there's a message loud and clear from the government today that national security comes above all else? Every other department likely to see cuts today if she's announcing anything relating to them. Yours the only one to get a boost, and that national defence comes even before the most vulnerable in our society.
Well, you'll hear the Chancellor argue today that national security is the foundation for everything else. It's the foundation for a stable, secure economy. It's the foundation for a confident society. And it's the first duty of our government. And that's why we're making this investment in an increasingly uncertain world, and in this new era of threats, we need a new era of defence, but we need a government, as this one does, willing to commit that to defence. But we're a government also that will make sure this is money well spent. It's a money that boosts Britain's jobs, Britain's businesses, Britain's innovation, Britain's technology, and we can do that right across the country.
I'm interested in what your view is on the EU talking about only entering some form of defence and security pact with the UK if things like fishing rights are part of the discussion too. Does it suggest to you that the EU doesn't get the message of how important this moment in time is?
No, I think everything that we've heard from the European Union and every European nation recognises that this is a time of increasing threats and greater insecurity. They recognise the leadership that Britain is providing on defence spending, on European security, on Ukraine, and they're ready to do similar. The European Union is recognising the case that we have to do more also to boost our defence industries across Europe, and that Britain has a big role to play. Look, the prospect of a partnership, a deal, if you like, or a pact between the EU and the UK is something that we've argued for some time. We're ready to do that. We're ready to contribute to the efforts that the European Union is making, but we can also do a great deal as we are with deeper defence agreements, as we've signed with Germany, with rebooting our special defence agreement with France, and in particular with NATO as our cornerstone, seeing UK and the European nations do more of the heavy lifting within NATO. That's the challenge that faces us in the period ahead. And you'll see the Chancellor this afternoon in the spring statement recognise that challenge, but respond to it, and respond to it in a way that demonstrates we can boost Britain's security, but we can also boost Britain's economy at the same time.
Is there a sort of renewed focus, not just because of the impact on jobs domestically, but because of security, to buy all our weaponry from domestic providers? There's been plenty of debate around the extent to which European allies can trust American equipment. And I guess linked to that is the fact that I think it's fair to say there's no way we could ever enter a conflict ourselves unless, essentially, the Americans approved it.
Now, I've argued for 3 or 4 years that British defence investment should be directed first towards British-based businesses and British jobs, and that's what we will now be doing in government. We can't design, make, and build everything for ourselves. We have to do some of that in collaboration with allies, and sometimes it's important that we are able to buy from the Americans. I mean, after all, the US is our closest security ally, and when Keir Starmer was in Washington with President Trump, both men committed to reinforcing and deepening that special relationship that we have.
Could we enter a war without their support, though? No.
Well, I can't see circumstances where Britain would go into conflict without the support of allies. That's the purpose of being a member of NATO, one of 32 nations that give us collectively the strength to deter those who might think about doing us harm. And if we do have to commit ourselves to any sort of action, then we've got ready-made allies to do so alongside us. And as I say, there's a uniquely deep relationship on security and defence between the UK and the US. It goes back decades. We're two nations that do things together that no other nations do. And that's the nature of the discussions that I've had with my counterpart, Defence Secretary Hegseth. Those are the discussions that Keir Starmer had with President Trump, and both nations are committed to reinforce that relationship in this uncertain period ahead.
Do you communicate with Defence Secretary Hegseth on Signal, on WhatsApp?
I talk to him regularly, and here in the UK Defence Department, we have a range of different communication channels for the business that we conduct. But to be quite honest, I spend most of the day without my phone because I work in locations where I have to leave all phones and electronic equipment outside. So it takes a bit of getting used to for me and for my family and my wife.
I mean, all jokes aside on this, I mean, would you ever use a mobile phone and any of these messaging apps that we all talk about often to do government business on, particularly given the role you have in government?
You know, one of the things that they drum rightly hard into you when you get a job like this extraordinary job that I have now as Defence Secretary is security, security, security. And I'm very conscious of that. The MOD here in the UK has got good security procedures in place.
Is there a risk that some of our intelligence that we obviously share fairly openly with the US is at risk?
No, we have the closest intelligence relationship that the US has with any other nation. We're part of a special arrangement with 5 nations. We do things together, we plan things together, we exchange intelligence together, which by doing so helps keep both our nations safe, makes our forces more effective, and strengthens the deterrence that both nations can offer against any of those that would want to do us ill.
I see the Ukrainian flag behind you, Defence Secretary. What do you make of this Black Sea ceasefire deal? Do you welcome that, or has it come at the same time with some nervousness about the White House's seeming willingness to ease economic sanctions on Russia before a full ceasefire arrives?
We're behind the pledge that President Trump has made to bring peace to Ukraine, a peace that will be durable and last. It's an opportunity that can only have been created by President Trump. The task now is to see this deal in the Black Sea as a precursor to a wider and longer-term ceasefire. If we can secure that peace, then the UK is willing to play a role, just as we have in supporting Ukraine through the fight. We will support Ukraine through the peace as well.
And just finally, Defence Secretary, are you a Sabrina Carpenter fan? Was that a good choice to take some free tickets for the Chancellor?
Well, one of the things about being a minister is that you get invited to all sorts of events and offered hospitality. We've got a system where that gets registered. We've toughened up that system, actually, in government. And you can look at my register. You'll find it's very boring, I'm afraid.
And so was it a mistake for the Chancellor to accept those tickets, do you think?
Oh, look, I know why you're asking that. Judge her by what she's doing. Judge her by what she lays out this afternoon in the House of Commons. You know, these are tough times, but we've seen interest rates cut 3 times since the election. We've seen wages rising faster than prices. We've seen nearly 200,000 jobs created in Britain since the last election. We're turning around 15 years of stagnant growth in this country, as the Bank of England governor has confirmed. This is a long haul, but it's a government that is determined to rebuild the strength of the economy, do our duty to protect national security, but also rebuild public services. And that's why we've been able to invest in the NHS. We've been able to see waiting lists come down. And we've been able to boost the incomes of the poorest by raising the national minimum wage.
Defence Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.